Hi, my name is Shane Hips. I'm a teaching pastor at a church called Mars Hill Bible Church in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And I have been asked to describe an aha moment in my leadership and ministry. Um, and the aha that happened for me actually happened as a result of an experience that I had doing pastoral counseling. But the aha came because I was really struggling with preaching at the time. So when I was just getting started as a pastor, one of the things that I found most frustrating was the inability to know whether or not your preaching was working. I had all these dreams about how effective I might be if I just worked hard enough and came up with creative ideas and creative connections between texts or who knows what. And so I worked very hard to try and make sure that my preaching was incredibly effective. The irony, of course, is that there's really no way of knowing whether or not your preaching is effective. So people would leave the church after a sermon that I just thought rocked it, and they'd be like, "Hey, great sermon, good sermon, thanks," you know. And then after a sermon that I just thought I bombed and it was no good at all, they come out and go, "Hey, great sermon, thanks, appreciate a good sermon." And I realized I'm starting to feel like this is one of these like standard greetings, like they don't actually mean what they have to say. So here I am expecting like total life transformation, and here they are giving me like, kind of platitudes. And so it became a very, very stressful experience, this whole thing of preaching and trying to have an impact and being really effective. And so that became one of my least favorite parts of my ministry, which was certainly one of the largest parts of my ministry was preaching. So what happened was I had this other learning from another part of my life that I allowed to infect my preaching, and it became a great aha, kind of an awakening for me. And the way I describe it is this: when I worked in counseling people, when I would do pastoral counseling with people, I had a lot of learning to do in that process. And one of the things that I learned is that I went from being a average to below average pastoral counselor to being a pretty reasonably effective pastoral counselor when one thing changed in my life, and that was when I became completely divested of the outcomes of anything that would happen in their life. So this may sound strange, but the most effective thing, the best way that I could serve someone in a counseling setting was if I had no investment in whether they took my advice. And the reason that that's true is because people could actually sense whether or not I needed them to take my advice to validate me as a counselor. So if they took my advice, that meant I was a good counselor, and therefore they, were patting me on the back. If they didn't take my advice, that meant I was a bad counselor. So I was very attached to whether or not they took my advice. Once I learned that I was going to be more effective by freeing them, by having no investment, things started to change. People actually started taking the advice, taking the interventions. They started to change, do things differently in their life. And the reason was because what I was offering came from the truest source of love, which is a love that has no strings attached. It was simply, I love you, and I don't care which way you decide. It's fine with me one way or another. But I'm going to keep offering you the truth, and either way is good. And oddly enough, that practice of being divested of outcomes actually freed them and me to actually change. And so counseling became this very easy thing for me to do. I had no stress. I took no more joy or less joy when somebody, received an intervention. And it occurred to me that that was the same lesson I needed to learn for preaching. That if I was convinced that I couldn't actually meaningfully help someone in a one-on-one setting with an hour of counseling, if I was really convinced that there was no way for me to really affect change, which I was convinced, I had no control over that, what gave me the idea that I could somehow affect hundreds of people in 30 minutes? And so at this point, what happened was I started to practice divesting myself of outcomes in my preaching. And one of the things that happened is my preaching radically changed. People started responding differently, more specifically to the things I was saying. And I actually saw changes in people's lives. The difference was I didn't really care one way or another, meaning I loved it, I loved them, but I was not invested in whether or not they did what I said they should do. And as a consequence, what comes with that is this incredible freedom, this incredible sense of my job is to offer my gift fearlessly and freely, independent of whatever the outcomes might be. And that can be a difficult thing to do, but once we get there, it's remarkable what starts happening. So preaching became for me something that I dreaded doing because I never felt I was effective, to something that I offer as an art, and whether or not people receive it or not is irrelevant. So some of this aha for me may seem counterintuitive, meaning we've been trained to kind of measure our metrics and our success and our effectiveness. And what I'm telling you is the spiritual practice of being totally disconnected and detached or uninvested in outcomes. And what I find is the less invested in outcomes we are, the more we often get the outcomes we had originally hoped for. So I hope that's useful to you. That was my aha moment. It continues to affect every part of my ministry, and hopefully it'll be useful. Thanks again for listening. Appreciate it.